Hello, and welcome back to Corona with Lime. I'm Chris Godwin. That's Adam Levy. And today we have an extremely special, amazing co host joining us, my lovely and wonderful wife, Adrian Bryant Godwin. Adrian, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Today is a huge deal for us. Today is our 10th episode, if you could
What?
believe it. We have been,
I
this is the
don't.
10th time we've done this. And it has been such a joy. Thank you to everybody who's been watching and following and commenting and being part of our family. This is just a really cool thing. And I'm so excited. I mean, especially after Monday's blockbuster insane episode. I think we have a worthy follow up today. The reason why Adrian is joining us, not because I have wanted her to join us for some time, but because she is an expert in the performing arts. And today we're going to be talking all about the performing arts. And there's nobody I know who is more qualified to do that than Adrian. So, Adrian, thank you for joining us.
It's very kind
Adrian,
and very smart of you
yeah,
to
very
say.
smart. I know, right? Adrian is 25 feet away from me in the other room, just for technical reasons, so that our microphones aren't interfering with each other. But usually, I'm in the office right now. Adrian's in the kitchen, usually like
Are
all
you
day.
in the office or are you at the theater?
I'm at the
Oh,
theater. Yes. How did you know? So we're just here to have a good time, and we're gonna talk to some friends about the status of the performing arts. But before we do that, Adam, checking in with you. How you doing, man?
doing pretty good. Just another week going by, giving into the whole stay-at-home quarantine business. I think last week I said I was starting some projects, working around the house, and we've made some good progress on my patio out back. All the weeds are gone, and that's huge.
So
That's humongous.
you did your sink, and you've made big progress on your patio. You got the weeds out.
Yep,
I mean, that's
absolutely.
so you're getting stuff done. You're being productive.
I'm as
I mean,
productive as I can be.
as
I've
productive as
got 20 feet of space that I can move around with to be productive, like a goldfish.
that's
It's wonderful.
that's right. Well, I mean, like, and whatever is possible to do counts. I think everyone just finding ways to keep themselves busy, and
Sure.
in some cases you can be really busy. Some people are just like laid out. I'm checking out playing video games, and however productive you can be is great too. Whatever it takes to get you through it, right? So yeah, so
100%.
before we get into today's show, and we have a bunch of amazing guests to talk to. As always, we would like to start with the news. So I'll go ahead and get us onto the news slides now.
Let's do the news.
So it's a lot of grim news. So we were on the air just 3 days ago on April 20th. At the time, the total case number was 746,625. The total deaths was 39,083 due to the coronavirus. Today is April 23rd, and we're just keeping going up. 828,441 total deaths. 46,379. That is around 7,000 people
In
in the
the
United
past three
States
days.
just in
In
three
the past
days.
3 days.
Worldwide, 3 days ago, it was 2.4 million, 2,482,348. Total deaths, 170,395. Today, those numbers are 2,725,490. Total deaths, 190,955.
So 20,000 people have died in 3 days around the world.
Yeah, and 7,000 just here. So I mean that's pretty
So
brutal.
we're one third of the total deaths in the world over the last 3 days.
Yeah, that's about right. And but we start the news because we need to keep cognizant that this is all happening. This is all quite real. And what we're talking about is this isn't just fictional
This-
randomness. This is all quite real, and we want to keep that context, and that's why we start every show
Sure.
with that. Let's dive in right away, Adrian. So tell us a little bit about what's going on in the performing arts, and as we do that, I have a couple of things to show here. So let's go through this list a little bit. So we have Sorry. There we go. Click on it. Okay. We have 3 items, as always. The current state of the arts, innovation and digital content, and how will the industry change? Tell us a little bit about why you picked these topics. Tell us a little bit about why these are relevant to what we're talking about today.
Sure. Well, one of the first things that I wanted to do was kind of set the stage, so to speak, so that people understand exactly how big of an industry the performing arts is. I think a lot of people, when they hear about the arts, sometimes, they think, oh, it's my local dance studio. It's not something that matters to me. It's, nothing that really has like a big impact on our country. And one of the things that the arts has been really great about in the past couple of decades is really quantifying their impact on the U.S. economy, because those are terms that anyone can understand. And so the arts learned that they had to really quantify this in order to be able to share with people, how important this is to our country. If you're not someone that's going to necessarily go to performance, be particularly moved, you can understand the numbers, you can understand the dollars. So first I wanted to start, Chris, if you can share.
And the numbers and the dollars are pretty intense, right? So let's go straight to that, because that's pretty wild stuff.
Yep. So the first thing that we're going to look at is how big the industry is in terms of dollars.
Well, let's start with the impact. Let's start with the economic impact of the coronavirus on the industry first, and we'll get to that in a second. So we have $4.8 billion economic impact overall.
Right. So this is what has happened to the performing arts industry in the wake of the pandemic. So $4.8 billion is, nothing to sneeze at, and I think represents how big of an industry it is. In terms of the impact, as you can see, 98% of events in the U.S. have been canceled, which is shocking.
I do have a question really quick, and you may not be able to answer this.
Sure.
What are the 2% of events that are still open?
Great question.
Solo performances for one individual. No.
Bad. Okay. All right. Cool. That makes sense.
Well, one thing I'll say is, for example, and we'll talk about this later, but these are, most of what we're used to are in-person events, right? Mm-hmm. But there's, as you've probably seen on your social media feeds, people are doing insane amounts of digital
concert
programming
shows
now, right?
Totally.
So that is still going on at an incredible rate. And again, we'll talk about that.
We'll call that the 2%. I agree.
We'll call that the 2%. So 42.3 million tickets to performances have been canceled. 12,262 layoffs. What else we got, Chris?
14,573 furloughs. Of course, the difference between layoff and furlough means that they might bring you back on, which means that you're eligible for unemployment and may have a job in the future once the economy gets going back again.
The layoffs not coming back.
And this is his last statistic. The 67% of organizations have modified their operating status, which I think is really, really crazy. And I think that's going to be a recurring theme of tonight's show, is how organizations in the performing arts have changed their operating status and their revenue models and their performance schedules and everything else. But let's get to the really big numbers.
Go for it.
The performing arts is a $730 billion industry. It represents 4.1 million jobs nationwide. That's just in the United States. And it generates $135 billion in economic activity overall. Not to mention that it generates, for anybody who works in government who's watching, around $22 billion in government revenue. And again, just like we talked about last week with education numbers, this has a huge impact. This is not a small deal. Millions of people are affected by it, and not only the people who work in the industry, but the ticket holders. If lots of people have stories about like shows that they had tickets for the spring that all got canceled, right? And that's how we sort of organize our lives. It's just sort of like we have like shows that we go to, and like, oh, in April I'm going to see this, in May we're going to see this, in June, and like all that's gone. So like for just like anybody who, even people who don't work in the performing arts and have had those experiences, it's sad for everybody, but it's especially intense and relevant for people who work in the industry and work so hard to make such amazing art.
Well, and I think it's important to realize that like it's not just the performers that are affected or the audience members that are affected. If you think about kind of like the wider ecosystem, it's the ushers, it's the crew, it's the marketing and fundraising staff, it's the parking attendants, it's the restaurants, that are now closed that used to be full of pre or post theater goers. So the ripple effect is pretty incredible.
It's pretty incredible. I mean, like, it's just like when you get into the numbers, like, of what's going on there and the scale of it, it's huge. It really does ripple out, right, to millions and millions of people who have been affected by this. So Adrian, tell us about your day job and how the coronavirus has affected your day to day.
Sure. So I am the director of programming at a university in Virginia, at George Mason University. And director of programming, what that means is I'm in charge of choosing which artists come and perform on our stages and interact with our communities. So when a theater presents a season, I'm the one that's in charge of curating that. So we have, obviously, per our statistics, we have canceled all of our performances this spring. And in a way to continue to connect our audiences who are out there with not a lot to do, with the artists who very much still have, amazing work that they want to share with people, and are also trying to still get paid. We have created an online platform called Mason Arts at Home, which is essentially a digital platform and a way for us to share pre-existing content that we have, but also we're doing interviews and Q&As with artists that our audiences either know already or artists that will be performing on our stages next year. We are connected to the College of Visual and Performing Arts, where we have, I think it's 1,400 students. And all of these students, I know we talked about education on Monday on the show, but all of these students have senior recitals that they are now having to conduct via Zoom. And so this is a way for them to be able to share their work with our audiences. And so we're doing 6 weeks of programming, almost doing a program every single day. Sometimes it's also sharing content that other people are creating, other artists are creating, or other organizations are creating. So my world has changed very rapidly from working on in-person events to trying to figure out how one live streams and how to not have internet lag and how to present high quality content in in a facet that I don't understand, that I don't really have previous experience with. So that's been an interesting challenge. As you are probably aware, people are starting to continue to extend the dates, the cancellation dates further and further. It's like every week we hear, okay, events are canceled to August, events are canceled to September. And now, in the news, there's a lot of talk about universities and whether they're even going to be in session in the fall in person or whether they're going to be online.
Yeah.
So we're starting to have those conversations. Usually we announce our seasons in March and April. We've postponed that indefinitely because when everything got canceled at first, we had to reschedule everything. We completely redid our season brochure. And then last week realized that season might not happen in any way, shape, or form. So it's a very turbulent time, and we don't know what the future is going to hold. We don't know if the fall season is going to happen. And obviously being part of a university, we are restricted to only being open if they allow us to be open. And you'll hear from our guest tonight And I tried to choose a couple of, very cool people that I love, but also people from lots of diverse backgrounds that can kind of talk about their work, because everyone's feeling this, very differently. We are connected to a university. There's our Performing Arts Center is, so there's, somewhat more stability perhaps than like an independent organization or a small organization. But everyone is, sharing the same uncertainty. And I think that artists and agents and presenters are all just kind of on hold until we see how long this will really take shape. And I think the last thing that I'll say is that one of the things that we're trying to think a lot about is, if we are legally allowed to be open in the fall, will audiences still come? Performing arts centers that have gone on sale with their seasons as originally planned are seeing about a 25%, like they're selling subscriptions at about 25% of where they were in
Wow.
in prior seasons. So there's not a ton of confidence that this is going to be resolved by this fall, and people are gonna, I think there was a survey that I saw that said that only 30% of people said that they would actually come back like immediately upon opening theaters. So people are going to wait it out and see, which means we don't know if we're going to sell any tickets, and which means we don't know if we can pay artists.
So it sounds, like the bottom line is that the future
I was
is
going to have a
uncertain.
drink because that was very depressing for me to say.
Please, cheers. Cheers, everyone watching. Cheers, Adrian. Cheers, Adam. Cheers.
Adrian, really quick. I know you just went through all that, and I just want to expand on just a couple things really, really quick.
The NFL draft?
No. I'm not, no, but thank you.
What NFL draft? I don't even know what that is.
I wanted to just quickly discuss your role at George Mason isn't just limited specifically to just the performing arts, that you do other stuff and you host other events too that might also reach out to viewers who are watching on the Twitch platform or people who are watching on YouTube. I think you had an event that was going to be coming up if it hadn't been canceled. If you quickly just want to just talk a little bit about what else you do at George Mason.
Sure. Yes. So we work very closely with a variety of entities on campus to create programming that's going to be exciting to all students, whether or not they're interested in the performing arts. I believe what Adam was referring to is an event that we started last year called Game Mason, which is a day-long convention where we bring in like big figures in the gaming industry. And we have like a variety of different games set up. We take over our entire Center for the Arts on our Fairfax campus. And it was amazing last year. Like we saw people come into the building that we had never seen before. This was their first time coming into the theater. Yes, we were supposed to have that event this spring on March 20th, and we had a voice actor, which a lot of people knew, and honestly, I didn't. Her name was Tara Strong, and this has been an interesting event for me to be involved in because I'm in charge of programming the keynote speakers, but I know nothing about gaming. So it's been fun because we've been we've had a student committee that is constantly feeding me ideas. And they're like, oh yeah, like they work on this game or they work for this company. And I just it's totally over my head. So.
And it's still a live performance because you had everybody on the stage there.
Oh, absolutely.
Competing. Yeah. So it wasn't just a digital tournament, which can be translated to what we're seeing going on now, right. But you actually had a hosted live game tournament for, I think it's intercollegiate play, right? Like I saw multiple different colleges that were playing at that time. It was George Mason versus.
Yeah, so that was Overwatch. We had a big Overwatch tournament where we had different universities from across Virginia. This was the culmination of many weeks leading up to this. And we set up all these computers on stage and we set up a huge screen on stage. And so people could sit in the audience and watch all of these teams compete. Yeah. And it was pretty cool.
I think it's amazing. So thank you so much for sharing that. I know you do so much with performing arts and stuff, but it's more than just a specific group. You reach out to a wide variety of different groups that it would appeal to. So thank you so much for sharing that. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, great call, Adam. Great call calling that out. Game Mason's a lot of fun. and we hope it returns.
It will
soon.
be back. It will be back.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Adrian, we have some amazing guests.
We have some. Let's get them on. I want to hang out.
And I
with
think
them.
we want to start with our first one, who I'm going to go ahead and admit now. And as soon as he's online, we can. There he is. Look at that magnificent beard.
Oh my goodness! You're muted, my love.
I unmuted him.
Okay.
Mr. John Higginbotham, how are you, sir?
Oh wait, do you know what? I should turn off my phone.
You have to, yeah.
I'm like,
The man has won a Guggenheim Award, but look at him.
Not for technology.
Well, you are in good company with the beard right now, sir.
Absolutely. This is beard times.
Thank you. Well, I will tell you my former boss, Mark Morris, with whom I've had a couple of social Zooms, has been coaching me on how to make this happen. Yes.
A beard quaffing, if you will.
Yeah. Yes.
Excellent. Adrian, tell us, John, we're just going to gush about you for a couple of seconds. So just sit there and listen. Adrian, tell us all about why John is so great and why he is here tonight.
So John is a man that's very near. Oh,
yes.
Is that Shakespeare?
That's Shakespeare in Love.
Guys, I'm at the Old Globe.
Yeah. Everyone just have a theater background.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Before you gush about me, can I just tell you something about this virtual background?
Yeah.
Before coming on here, I looked up Old Globe, Shakespeare's Old Globe Theater images on Google.
And that was the first one.
They're like, no, this was not the first one. They were like very, very like not good pictures. And so I had to resort, even though we're talking about live theater, I had to resort to this slide from Shakespeare in Love.
I thought that you did that because that's one of my favorite movies.
Oh, no, he did.
I'm also slightly aware.
Obviously, because it's Adrian's favorite movie, you guys. I mean,
which I'm not supposed to say because Chris, I think that might embarrass him as a film person. That
I love Shakespeare in Love. I mean, the historical inaccuracy notwithstanding, great movie.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And we'll do a whole show about that later. But go on. Gush.
All right, I'm gonna gush about John. Okay, so John Higginbotham is an award-winning choreographer, performance artist, teacher. You might know him because he choreographed the very beautiful and innovative and controversial Oklahoma that was on Broadway. Tony Award-winning Oklahoma that was recently on Broadway.
I can't. Yes. Wait, I can't find.
That's a little pin.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I could not find my own body.
I know.
Aren't you a choreographer?
Irony. Let's go on.
John, as he mentioned, was a member of the Mark Morris dance group for 14 years. And then he started his own dance company, Dance Higginbotham, right there. And I had the great joy and pleasure of starting that company with him. And so we worked together for 7 years, and we created a lot of really crazy, amazing stuff. And we traveled the world together. In
the 7 Seas.
In the 7 Seas. And I'm so proud to currently still be a board member for Dance Higginbotham. And John is one of the most insane people I've ever met, and also one of the most beautiful people that I've ever met. So thank you, John, for being here.
Thank you so much. That's really beautiful. Thank you.
But I feel like you have a really interesting perspective because you run a small modern dance company. And you also, with, like a budget of this big, but you also now have your foot in the Broadway world with, much larger budgets. So you have a particularly, unique perspective, and you do a lot of freelance work with ballets, with universities. You're the busiest man in show business. So
fingers in a lot of pots.
Fingers in a lot of pots.
Yes.
So very curious about first of all, let's check in with you. How are you doing? You're in New York right now.
Yes, I'm in Brooklyn, New York, in my apartment on the 6th floor, which is the top floor of this particular building.
Don't tell them your address, John. That's not safe.
My social security number.
My social security number is 8273.
Ooh.
Write it down. Write it down.
Did I get the first three right? Oh wow, that's
Yeah.
great. So you have a unique perspective on all of this, and I think we're fascinated to know what just your initial thoughts on how has quarantine and the state of affairs affected you.
Well, I have to say, and I think that what I'm about to say is probably not that dissimilar from a lot of people's experience, but I will say, like, as a person, I'm experiencing the time of coronavirus in waves. Sometimes I'm actually fairly content. Like, I'm comfortable in my apartment. I am sleeping better than I have slept in a long, like I often only get 4 or 5 hours a night. And that's not the case here because schedule is so flexible for a lot of us right now. I'm having daydreaming time. So I'm feeling actually in some ways pretty creative, which feels maybe a little bit surprising, but also good. And then I also have these waves where I really worry about some of the people around me that I am not near and who are isolated. And I worry, as the news of this, as you were talking about, Adrian, this unfolding, cancellations and events getting pushed further and further, and also reading in the news about how really there's not going to be a strong end to this potentially for 4 or 5 years. And, that really definitely certainly scares me, because it's one thing to teach a dance course for one term, right? As we all react to this, but 5 years worth, I actually don't know what exactly the value of it becomes at that point.
Is it possible to teach dance in a social distancing environment?
You mean like in person, but social distancing?
Yeah, they just stand 6 feet apart.
So I would say, yes, technically that is absolutely possible. Also, you could be outside, you know what I mean? In a, like outside or inside, socially distanced. My feeling is like, at least in New York right now, there's really a strong idea that it is not smart to be out very often with people. So I think psychologically, the idea of saying like, hey, let's all do a socially distanced dance class tomorrow, I feel like people would be leery of that. A month from now or 2 months from now, yeah, maybe we could make a move in that direction. Like, even if we don't have a cure or a vaccine, maybe there is a scenario where we can start coming out of our holes and moving out into space again.
I've got a question for you, John. Just expanding on what you were just talking about, saying that you were going from a schedule where you were only getting 4 to 5 hours of sleep, and now in this new world, you're feeling extra creative during the day and stuff. How do you see this affecting you moving forward when things go back to, I don't know if they will go back to a normal state, but go back to a state where people are going to be out and about and work is going to be up and running a lot more? Do you see yourself as modifying your schedule to give you some more you time? Or are you going to fall back into the ways of 4 hours of sleep a night kind of thing? Like, is there any positives to be taken from this?
Well, I would say that just as a person, I do crave a lot of alone time. So there is an aspect to this that is not unpleasant for me. But I also feel like, you know what, I'm a person who, like, for instance, jet lag, I kind of feel I pride myself on that not really affecting me, because sometimes I get 4 hours, sometimes I can get, I love to sleep. Sometimes I can get 10 hours, but like, day and night and that kind of thing, like I'm able to function in a lot of different situations. So I kind of feel like, I mean, if the world opens back up again, I think I'll bounce into whatever that is. Some combination of what's happening now and what has happened before will combine to create a fine situation for later for me personally.
Thank you.
And what do you?
Wait, Adam, I just have to tell you. I know we already did the beard talk. Your beard is extraordinary. It really, really is nice.
Thank you. Both of
Appreciate
you have
that.
extraordinary beards. I'm aspirational,
Appreciate
but
that.
you guys are just killing the beard game right now.
Chris, the night is young.
Yeah, we can talk about your beard all night, Chris.
And we will get there. But yeah, no, I think it's really interesting. Like, and so you mentioned sleep. I've been having a lot of struggle with sleep. I'm on the other side of the spectrum. It's been tough for me. But I feel like it's also just because of people deal with stress in different ways, right? You in your creative process, as you create new works, as you think about like your 19 different jobs that you have with huge major universities that I will let you name if you want to or not. And other dance institutions, both in New York and in DC and elsewhere. How has it affected your creative process?
Well, again, like all of us who are thrust now into this situation, the difference in process is that I know what it is to walk into a studio and work with dancers and create a dance. I don't always know what's going to happen in the studio, but I certainly know the format of what to expect. And like, just with this idea of not turning my phone off and hearing you on YouTube with the delay and realizing like, oh, I have to turn that off. Like, I'm really not tech savvy. So my creative process is being affected, by just learning what this new format is, and also questioning like what we're all seeing right now. It's always in a square, it's always facing forward. I mean, it's always flat, it's two-dimensional, stacked, it's two-dimensional. And the idea of like, first of all, do I even, that's not something I've chosen. Do I even feel like investing the energy and trying to is it necessary for me to create something right now? There's that question. But also I love puzzles. And this to me is like a big giant puzzle of how do we make this work? And I also love to experiment. So I'm not afraid of like trying some stuff out and being like, okay, well, there was a reason you had an impulse that you maybe shouldn't create because what you did sucked. And it looks like everything else that everybody else is doing, and you're not adding to the conversation, you're just adding to white noise.
Right.
Yeah. But then on the other side, like, oh yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, on a scale of 1 to 10, like with 1 being you love it and 10 being you hate it, where do you fall in terms of like everyone pushing out digital content like all the time?
I'm so conflicted because here's how I feel about it. I would say that I'm probably like a 7. Well, I feel horrible saying that. Like a 7, 6-ish, 7-ish. Like, I don't like the idea of the.
You don't like the idea of the cause, but the result is.
Yeah, I just feel like what's happening. Here's what it is, Chris. You're right. Like, there's something about what's happening that I don't always feel that it's thoughtfully done. It's just being done. Like this explosion of like, gotta do something, whether or not it's interesting or whether or not,
Yeah, like our show here.
Like the show that you're on right now, exactly.
No, but this is different because this is being thoughtfully.
Just kidding. I agree. I put some thought into it. Yeah. Chris put some thought into it.
Someone did.
But then on the other side of that, even though I say I'm a 6 or a 7, I now spend quite a lot of time like on my phone skimming through a lot of material. And so even the things that I say I'm not necessarily that supportive of, I watch a ton of it, and I do contribute to some of this.
I watched you on an interview just last night.
Yeah, right. Yes. Yes. Yeah, that's one of the things. I will say one thing though about that interview, that also, it was already like, that interview was created back in January, and the whole concept behind it was talk show. So
what was the interview? Sorry, so just some context for people who are watching who don't know what you're talking about. What was the interview you're talking about?
So I work at Dartmouth College at the Hopkins Center for the Performing Arts, which is run by a really great team. I gotta say, like, really great team. And the executive director, Mary Lou Oleski, sort of opened the door for this idea based around Oklahoma. Actually, she saw Oklahoma and had this strong response to it, politically, sort of like theater as activism. And she wanted to use that as maybe a forum to start a talk show around some of those subjects. And then collaboratively, we decided, well, what if it's always focused on Broadway? And it's a talk show, where people are interviewed that have some connection with commercial theater, but in commercial theater that is off what we consider traditional, and I would say, so this talk show to me feels like it's like a combination, or it aspires to be a combination of Inside the Actor Studio and Wayne's World. Kind of a little bit is kind of what it feels like. And so the interview that was filmed back in January, was with the director, the genius director, Rachel Chavkin, who won the Tony Award for Hadestown this past year.
Great show.
And great show. I've seen it twice now, and I have to say it's really, really excellent. And she is one of the smartest people that I knew people that I've encountered recently. I was really happy to be able to talk with her.
Sean, I have to tell you that my staging was inspired by the staging of your interview last night, because he had these two beautiful plants on either side. And so I made sure that I had a plant behind me.
Yes,
I'm just beside one fern.
Your backgrounds on Zoom meetings do matter.
Yes.
So I want to. This is fascinating, but I want to expand this conversation a little bit. So Adrian, if you're ready, I think we could bring in our next guest.
Yes, because I think it's a great segue, because our next guest, who I'll just keep talking while you bring her into the chat. So Kristie Bolingbroke is the founding executive and artistic director of the National Center for Choreography in Akron, Ohio. And I've known Kristie for a very long time. We go back to Mark Morris days. Kristie was the director of marketing for the Mark Morris Dance Group. And then she moved to San Francisco, and she worked at ODC Theater and was a presenter there and curator. And Kristie has this like amazing knowledge of the national dance scene. It's true. It's like, whenever I'm like, who's doing something like this? Or like, what do you think, like you absolutely have your foot on the ground when it comes to like knowing what people are doing across the nation. And now that's your job, is to support choreographers and performance artists. And I'll let you explain a little bit of what you do, but it's really grounded in supporting, through residencies, but supporting the creative work that they do and allowing artists to focus on the process, which is just like gold when it comes to being an artist. Most people want you just to come and perform, but Kristie says, I want you to come and think and research. And it's a beautiful thing. And so we're glad to have you here.
Thank you for joining the show, Kristie.
Sure. And as far as backgrounds go, we know when everyone else stocked up on toilet paper, I stocked up on Post-it notes. So,
You're a
anyone who's worked with me is not surprised.
That sounds like some solid planning. So good for you for doing that. Kristie, first of all, let's check in with you. How are you doing? Where are you right now? And how are you doing?
I'm in Akron, Ohio, on a second floor apartment.
Everyone at different levels everywhere. Kinda,
Yes, yes.
yeah.
And I'm really just feeling very fortunate because I live alone. I live in an affordable city where I have enough space to have both a home office separate from my living space, so I can create those kinds of boundaries. And yeah, I mean, other than the whole pandemic and world-ending feeling when you read the news, it's not unlike when I first moved to Akron, Ohio, and didn't have an office yet, and I worked from home for almost a year. Except now I have more team, and thank goodness too, also a community that has really showed up to help me get things like groceries.
Sure. And tell me a little bit. So we've been talking a lot about, like, just in context of like how the performing arts have been handling the crisis. And the numbers are not great. We started the show. You may have seen at the top of the show, the numbers are pretty grim. Just in terms of like the financial impact that this has had, billions of dollars on the performing arts. You're really tied in closely with choreographers and performing artists all over the country. What are you hearing? What are they saying to you? What are the pain points, and what are some of the ways that they're creative ways they're coping?
Yes, Adrian mentioned a little bit. So my measurements of success don't include ticket sales. If we do any sort of showing and one person shows up, I'm like, great. But even then, that's for free because it really is about work in process. It's not a requirement. So I feel very grateful that when shelter in place started happening, unlike so many of my colleagues, I was not canceling shows. I was not reaching out to ticket buyers and trying to convince them to donate their tickets instead. I was not breaking, dreams for artists who were maybe getting their debut on certain stages. I also realized that, any time throughout the year, at least for like a season, and I don't know about George Mason now, but you might have 4 or 5 dance events out of 80 or 120 events on a season.
Yep.
We have some colleagues that do 50 weeks of dance programming. So for them, they would cancel like the next 6 weeks, and then they would have to relive it all over again. Like they're in a perpetual state of trauma, canceling events, dealing with ticket buyers, managing artist expectations. So I definitely try to be there for them, both for the artists and those colleagues. But I also realized like my unique role and opportunity was to start to think about rebounding. What will we do when we are open next? Because the reality is, and Adrian said it well, like, will people even want to come out for a show again? But even if this was short lived and we were like, great, June 1st, we're open, that doesn't mean John's been able to rehearse with his dancers. That doesn't mean we could just have a show that weekend. So I've been thinking a lot about like, how do we think about the choreographic process differently if people want to make work, and not everyone does. I'm sure we've all seen that thing going around on Facebook, Shakespeare wrote King Lear. I felt it important to acknowledge that with there in the background.
I was thinking the same thing. King Lear,
I started reading King Lear in honor of that.
Just because.
And Titus Andronicus, apparently both plays during the same plague. Yeah.
And I'm not here to impress that kind of pressure upon artists, but if they want to work, we're going to be ready to support them in that way. Initially, just a few more numbers or perspective, because were very impressive in terms of the scale of industry. And I can't speak for the performing arts as holistically as far as like theater or music, but in dance, 80% of our field works on a project basis. That means they're not necessarily incorporated as a 501c3, that they may be fiscally sponsored. They are not employing their dancers and their cast and their team on a full-time basis. So we were already operating below the line, all right, as far as what normal was before COVID. And so I heard a lot from artists in the beginning, because we did end up postponing 2 residencies. And their response was like, well, what's best practices? What's normal in this situation? And I was like, There
No
is no
normal.
normal. Yeah, there's no precedent for this. And I tend to shy away from best practices because it assumes everyone's operating environment is the same. And you have a different normal when you are trying to build an artistic entity in New York and when you're trying to build an artistic entity in Indiana or anywhere else. So we talked through a little bit like what are your options? And there were lots of questions around cash flow if you have grant restricted funds that you were supposed to premiere a new work this spring. You were optimistic that you might get to premiere it later this year. So I had conversations with artists who said, like, can I pay my dancers now, like advance them the funds for work and rehearsals that they may do later on this year? I am
Yeah.
not a tax professional, but those were the kinds of discussions that we were having.
So I could totally understand that you want to like get away from like terms like best practices because it is sort of a catch-all. Like, I mean, who knows? What a best practice for one person is almost certainly not for another. But have you seen anybody making decisions or trying avenues that have been successful, either like in a more traditional way or in like wow, this person's really thinking out of the box? I feel like you have a good bird's eye view on that. What kind of things are you hearing? What are people doing to cope?
Yeah, I think what we recognize is also specific to people's previous operating environments. So, Kate Wallach is a choreographer out of Seattle, and she has an offline practice called Dance Church. This is where she teaches classes. It's very popular with the tech sector, very hipster, advertised as the dance party you wish you'd been at the night before.
Ooh.
It takes place with a live DJ. He already wears a Madonna mic or a Britney mic, depending on your generation.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, you
Yeah.
need one, right there.
I feel like Adam Levy would look particularly good with that kind of
Oh
mic.
yeah, I just have like that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
He does when he's recording his TikTok dance videos. Anyway, you were saying?
There you go.
I told you not to tell anybody.
Oh, sorry. Oh God, cat's out of the bag. Sorry. Go ahead.
She was already doing those things. In less than a week, right away, they live stream twice a week on Sundays and Wednesdays. Keeping a respectful distance, there's usually 3 or 4 of them in the room. They're dancing 6 feet apart. It is follow the leader. There is no front. There is no mirror. You have the live music being mixed with the DJ. They had a 2-camera shoot. These were skills that they didn't have to like dial it up and learn. It was already in their wheelhouse, and they were able to turn the switch faster.
So they're prepared to go digital, like in terms of like just moving everything online. That was.
They were a little bit closer there. And I'll tell
Yeah.
you what blows my mind with that, because I would say if I could co-opt the 1 to 10 scale, I'm a 5.
Yeah.
For a lot of the same reasons, right? Like everything doesn't need to be online, but
Totally.
at the same time, it's a great way to repurpose. With this dance church class, if you log in, thousands of people. You don't
Wow.
want to take a regular dance class with thousands of people, right? And I'm so fascinated by how these new things will stretch what capacity may mean for our field. You're not just trying to fill a theater with 500 seats anymore. You're not just trying to have a meaningful experience in the studio with, you don't want more than like 15 or 20 students because you want to be able to give them all one-on-one time. And not everyone's approach is going to scale that way. But that's one example that I've been really fascinated with how quickly they were able to activate and do something that otherwise you could only experience in person.
So I just want to real quick. We have one more guest I want to bring in. But before we do that, I want to ask you this because you mentioned scale about like scaling from like a class of how many people could fit into a room to the digital scale of infinite, right? So it reminds me a little bit, and tell me if this is a terrible analogy. Maybe it's totally off base. But it reminds me, because I have a film background, I worked in the film industry, and it reminds me a little bit of like the transition we've seen in Hollywood, where It used to be the marginal business was, ticket sales, get people in the seats and get people to the theaters opening weekend, long tail, drop off, and then you made all your money in the first 2 weekends, and that was it. That's how movies make money. And now and we have seen over the last 10 years with the rise of streaming services, that marginal cost has come way down, and we've seen the economics in the film industry totally change from like the in-person venue of seeing a film to the streaming experience of a Netflix or a Hulu or an Amazon or whatever. And it sounds kind of like that's the direction that you're talking about, right? So like a dance class like that becomes, so instead of like, oh, I hope I can sell a $40 ticket for or a $40 membership for a dance class, like you could those margins could come way down and spread out the way that Netflix can do. So like, we're going to put this pile of money into this 10 episode show, but it's going to be seen by hundreds of millions of people around the world, and it will just and those subscription fees will justify the expense of that. Do you see any parallel there? Do you think that there's like a digital that Hollywood jumped into the digital realm from the analog theater realm? Is there any parallel?
There's definitely that possibility, and dance films have been happening for a while. And because here's the thing, like you could spend $50,000 making a piece that you might get to perform 3 times. And you could also spend $50,000 on a dance film that could then go to 20 different cities and festivals all around the world and have a life online. Dance is a little bit far behind because we haven't figured out how to monetize the streaming, and that's why I'm a 5 is like, oh my God, we're giving it away.
Yeah.
So we roll this out long term. And making dance films isn't for everyone, but to me, and I appreciate John's comments about what it is when you walk into the studio. There's also an artist, Deborah Hay. Can I curse?
Yeah, of course.
This is an adult channel.
No one fucking cares.
All right,
Chris does all the time.
Deborah Hay had made a piece and a book called "Turn Your Fucking Head."
Yeah.
And her point was that in the spirit of dance making, dancers have a habit where we walk into a space, whether it's a studio or this is where we're performing today. And the first question we ask is, what's front? And that then decides every other question for you and every other answer, right? You don't see the opportunities in the corners. You don't see the opportunities behind you. You don't, try something out that you've never tried before. You presume and make a lot of assumptions about the puzzle that's in front of you. So this opportunity is an opportunity, we don't ask what's front anymore because we're working in a totally different paradigm. I'm interested that you brought up the film and television piece of it, though, because the other thing I've been thinking about a lot, and this is my knowledge as a consumer, is remembering there was a writer's strike in the early 2000s.
Oh yeah, I lived right through it.
I can talk to you about that. Yes.
So, oh my God. So
I was there.
That's why we needed to hang out. My knowledge as an observer and memory is that it was like before Netflix and streaming really took off.
2007. It was like September, October 2007. Yeah, it was like right at the beginning, the change over from the DVD thing that they used to do to the streaming thing, and that happened like a year or two later.
And it was definitely that disruption was happening because there were, a lot of bargaining units were like, wait a minute, we want to make sure that we're covered on the back end of this. But think about how that moment of disruption also changed the form. You used to have TV shows that did 24 episodes, and now all of a sudden you have a 6-episode season and it's tight. Or, 6 episodes that split and you release 2 different seasons at 2 different times of the year. It totally changed our relationship with time. And that's the other thing that I think is our moment right now. Technology is certainly a part of it, but we are operating outside or perhaps above time, space, and place. And what sort of creativity or options will that afford us?
Well,
Kristie, is it okay if I say something?
Please, absolutely.
I'll be fast.
Go for it.
Because I know Jagan's coming in too. But you just brought up something that is a huge question for me right now. I'm starting a project for Works in Process at the Guggenheim. They've commissioned several artists to make things for online content. And one of the things that the way that I experience a lot of what I watch right now is like I'm always in control of how fast I want something to go, or do I skip ahead, or do I stop watching, you know, whereas when I'm in a theater, when I'm in a live event, I'm much more comfortable with the idea like, well, I'm going to sit here and it's going to take the amount of time it takes, and I'm going to be present while that happens. But now I have total power over how long I spend with anything. Mm-hmm. And I don't know the answer yet to that question. There's part of me that wants to approach this project as something where you don't have to spend any particular amount of time with something, and where you can skip ahead and there's value, and skip back and there's value. Or do I want to ignore that and let something play out?
I have an idea, John.
What is it?
Because I know John's work. I've worked with John often over the years too. Think of it like an airmail dance. So what if you make something for the screen? It's a film, but then the audience instruction is like an airmail, like fast forward an indeterminate amount of time. Now stop it and hold it for what you think is 5 seconds. Now go back. Like you could still direct their experience to play with what you're making.
That's really interesting.
I like that.
Kristie, that's really cool.
I'm here for you.
Innovation on the air.
Oh,
that's
awesome.
What's up. That's what we do here at Corona with Lime.
So I have to say,
later.
time and space actually brings me to a great transition to our next guest.
Should I bring in our next guest?
Bring in your next guest, and I'm going to tell a little story, which is so Jane Rabinowitz, who is joining us, is the co-director of dance programming at the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts, which is kind of a big deal. Like, let's be perfectly honest, kind of a big deal. Jane has had an amazing career and has like come up the ranks at the Kennedy Center. She's also continues to be a performing artist herself. Jane, it's so nice to see your face.
Hi, Jane.
Yeah, hello. Thanks for having me. Hey,
but
everybody.
So time and space. So I don't even know if you know this, Jane, but Dance Higginbotham had its first performance ever at the Kennedy Center on the Millennium Stage.
Yeah.
And like in the wee, moments of our birth, we didn't have a name. And so we had our performance at the Kennedy Center coming up, and Meg Booth, who is no longer at the Kennedy Center, but who's a wonderful friend, she was like, okay, well, we need a name of your company if we're going to have a performance. And so John and I spent like weeks, hours on Skype looking at each other being like, what is the name of our company going to be? And we said, okay, we don't want it to have the words dance or Higginbotham in it. Like whatever we do, not dance and not Higginbotham.
So let's go for both of those things.
We wanted it to be like a band name.
Yeah, we wanted it to be a band name. So we had a lot, like there was one idea that was like John Higginbotham and the Squares. That was one that we talked about for a while.
I love that.
There was a lot of different ideas. One of them was John Higginbotham and the Lords of Time and Space.
What?
Which I actually really love.
What?
Who said no to that one?
Well, I started
agree.
Googling and I was like, Lords of Time and Space. Like, are we going to get in trouble with the Christian right for that? And so like, I went into a whole spiral about it. Anyway, the day before the name of our company was due, we were on Skype very late, and I was like, I'm going to close out of Skype. In the morning, he will text me what the name of our company is. And so we did that. And so he texted me Dance Higginbotham. And I was like, that's literally exactly what we said we weren't going to name our company.
Well, I've always loved your guys' name because of the logo, John.
John, yeah.
Show it one more time.
So it's a very clever logo.
D and an H.
Yeah.
It's a D and an H, but it's also a dancer.
That was the creative process. Like you start with an idea, you say that's not it. You go all the way back
all the way around.
Yeah. But at least you've exercised all the other options.
Well, and you know what I love is that Kristie, I remember like a year ago.
DH, yeah.
I hope you don't mind me sharing this, but like a year ago, you texted and you were like, oh, the logo's a little man, or you said the logo's a DH or something. And like, we've worked together for years, and like, that is exactly what we wanted to happen with that logo, was the long play.
The long play. And
Nice.
it took me a while too, looking at it, be like, wow, that's really clever. Wait a minute.
Never looked
Wait
at
a
it
minute, that's a
sideways.
D.
Yeah.
I mean, plus Neil deGrasse Tyson called you and said his dance company, Lords of Time and Space, was already taken.
Ah. Adam,
So obviously,
I think we should start a podcast called Lords of Time and Space. I think
It's a
that's
good name. It's a good name.
it's under consideration.
for,
Don't worry.
our next show. So now that
Anyway,
we have,
Jane Rabinowitz, everyone.
yeah, Jane Rabinowitz,
Oh,
everybody.
thank you.
So
Thank you.
Jane, now that you're with us, I just want to throw you the same questions. So first of all, I want to check in with you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. I am in Washington, D.C., just down the road from Chris and Adrian. I actually live in Arlington, Virginia, so we're in the same state.
Yeah.
I have a third floor apartment.
Oh,
And,
nice.
We got 2, 6, 3, and 1. All three of us are on the
Yeah,
first floor.
I'm on
There
the
you go.
first floor. Woo.
Yeah.
I will say we don't have a balcony on or any way of being outside in our apartment, and so that has been one thing that I've been jealous of, is friends and family who have outdoor space that they own that is private, that we do not have. But yeah, personally, I'm good. We're navigating. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment with my fiance, who's on a Zoom call in the other room.
Nice.
So we've been navigating that, who goes into what room for what meeting of the day.
such is the life now, right?
Right,
Like, I have a
exactly.
Zoom call. No, I have a Zoom call.
no,
Adrian,
no,
Adrian
I
will
think
tell you that Adrian and I switch off spaces because we're like office, right? So we're like in and out like each other's Zoom calls. I'm like wired into a whole monitor situation. So
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, Adrian and I have a Zoom call. She's like, all right, I'll go. She's like, poor Adrian has to like leave all the time for Zoom calls.
We share notes with each other, and like today I was in the kitchen. I was on the kitchen table, and Chris and Todd, my brother, who also lives with us right now, started having a conversation in the kitchen. I was like, "You guys, I'm on a call," and I like stormed out. I haven't apologized yet for that. Sorry, Chris.
Well, this is and it's all about just giving space, right? But and so Jane, I want to hear from you about like, so we've been talking about the effect of this on the performing arts. You have an amazing perspective on this. You're at the Kennedy Center, one of the, if not the greatest performing arts venue, one of the top ones in the world. So tell me what your thoughts about this were. The Kennedy Center in particular was name checked in the CARES Act that was passed a couple weeks ago. I think it was $20 some odd million.
Yeah, $25 million.
$25 million.
Yep.
And I was like, wow, I could, and that was like in all, like it was published and like the Kennedy Center is getting a big pile of money, and that was one of the things that kind of inspired us to kind of get into this, was like what is the effect on it. So there's the financial impact. We've talked a little bit about that, but you are in contact with all these artists that come through this like amazing, prestigious performing arts venue. What are you hearing on the ground with the artists that you work with? You're in charge of dance programming in particular, so I know you have a lot of contacts there. But like, what are you hearing? What are some of the stories and the stories of overcoming the situation you're hearing? What's your view of the ground?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's most interesting about my position, because I work in a collaborative team that deals with dance, but then also in the grander scale of the Kennedy Center, dance is only a small portion of what the center puts on, that we're dealing with the biggest, most international, most massive ballet and contemporary dance companies in the world. But we also present a significant number of local independent artists on the Millennium stage, where Dance Hibotham was born. So my day-to-day is very similar to Adrian's in terms of booking and dealing with cancellations. But it's just been a very stark contrast between dealing with the tours that are 4, 5, 6, 7 international countries. And if you're the country in the middle and you have to cancel, then the rest of the tour crumbles around it, and how gut-wrenching that is. But a lot of those international companies are supported by international governments, are subsidized by the governments, the EU, and so you don't have to worry as much. And then I also had a significant number of cancellations where sort of what you were saying before is like, you can spend your whole year making one work, and you on the Millennium stage, you might have one performance once, and you spent the whole year making that work for that one show, and now we've canceled it. So it's been interesting for me. And as Adrian mentioned, I do perform locally, which I don't usually say that in a professional context because I perform with such an itty bitty. No, I love it. I perform with such an itty bitty.
This isn't a professional show. Nobody.
Yeah, no. But it is interesting sometimes when I'm talking to local dancers to have the Jane the Dancer hat on. Of like, oh yeah, this is so crazy. The virtual dance classes are so difficult. The company I work with is not rehearsing. We canceled all our shows. We're just stopped. And then also to hear those same conversations with the Kennedy Center hat on, and just to, I'm trying to remember the term. I was just talking to somebody yesterday about the moral fatigue of like this idea that it's nobody's fault and it's nobody's responsibility except all of us to bound together and get through it. But sometimes the weight of working at a large institution, I think, carries this moral responsibility that, like you said, artists rely on the Kennedy Center to present a lot of work and at a high level and to pay high fees. And when those things cancel, it can be devastating for artists.
Yeah, it's like a dam on the river, right? It's like all of a sudden that gets shut down. Sorry, Kristie, you had your hand up. Do you want to say something?
Well, I appreciate you bringing that up because when John talked about experiencing coronavirus in waves, like that's what I also feel and sense is that you're like, okay, I'm good this week, and then you interact with someone who is still having an emotional, and they were fine last week, and so it's. Feeling like I'm supposed to hold this position in the field, but some days you also need to kind of like take a break or step out. And I think like that's part of the timing is that we're on experiencing it in waves, but not all on the same rhythm.
Yeah, and I think another weird thing specifically about the Kennedy Center, like you said, Chris, we were mentioned in the CARES Act and got that earmark, which then received a significant amount of press. Because a few days later, the Kennedy Center also furloughed 60% of staff. And tomorrow is actually, as of now, my last day of work. And then I go on furlough starting on Monday.
Oh, wow.
So
I'm so sorry.
It's like, well, I mean, it's one of those things where personally I'm okay, which is really nice, but a lot of my colleagues aren't. And so it has been a weird thing to see your own institution in the news and like totally just
because people are going to see that and be like, oh, Jane's going to be fine. Oh, they got a big pile of money. No problem. She's it's all good. And
right.
Then, like,
and I mean, I do believe like the institution will be fine. Everyone's been furloughed. There haven't really been layoffs. So, we're all hopeful that we'll all be able to come back to work.
Furloughed and not laid off, which is an important distinction. So laid off means like you're done by. Furlough means like we'll see you later or we'll see you soon, but we can't pay you now. Right. So that's an important distinction.
But it's definitely weird to see your place of work in the news and then have your own experience of it side by side.
Right. And that's what's so fascinating is like I think that and there is kind of a disconnect because like in the news in general, like big picture, zooming all the way out, is the CARES Act was like, oh my God, $2 trillion are going to go into the economy, and everyone's just like, awesome, I hope I get a piece of that cash. And it turns out that a lot of people didn't, and that's in a lot of sectors, not just the performing arts, but elsewhere. But I think the performing arts are getting hit especially hard because like that's, it's everyone's like favorite luxury spending, but it's not really because it's like, it is very much the fabric that so much of our culture depends on, even if it's like, if you're not like going to shows at the Kennedy Center or Lincoln Center or whatever local performing arts venue is near you, it's not just like about like going to see shows and what shows are coming to town. There are so many people who are involved, financially involved, and it becomes a big cultural attraction for tourism to your city, and it's a huge deal, and it ripples, right? We were talking about that $700 billion number at the top. That's like the full ripple effect of like, we were talking about that earlier, like the ripple effect. Like so much depends on that. It's so important. And when you hear a story like oh the Kennedy Center just got this big chunk of money from the CARES Act, all good, they're fine. No, they're not really fine. That's like the bare minimum, and a lot of that just got totally overlooked for all this the small business loans spending and all the other things. Like even I think it was 350 before. I think it's another 250 billion now. it's just not enough. There's got to be more.
It's also interesting, and Kristie's pinging me in the chat, which I think is interesting to bring up. It's also an interesting time to just realize the Kennedy Center, as a case example, we are half a federal memorial to John F. Kennedy, which is why we were enacted by an act of Congress, and all of our utilities to keep the lights on, to keep the memorial looking nice and open to the public, is paid for by the federal government always. But the nonprofit side, which is where I work and where all of the performing arts professionals are, is a private trust and is fully funded privately.
Yeah.
So I think that's also been an interesting distinction, just to, when it goes in the news, the CARES Act money is federal money.
Right.
So it doesn't pay the salaries of the people that are experiencing job loss due to all of the canceled performances and everything like that. But it's a super weird construct that most people have no idea about.
So we're coming up on the end here. Adam and Adrian, I wanted to give you guys both the last chance to ask any questions that you wanted to do before I have one last question for all the guests before we go.
Adrian, why don't you please go first?
Well, I just wanted to highlight something that Kristie brought up, which is like in this industry, I think it's so important to realize the percentage of the industry that is project based. And like one thing that we haven't really talked about is how we will be affected moving forward, and like what will this industry look like, because I would say the majority of dance artists are not employed right now, like if you really have to think about it. So what's going to happen? Are people going to stop dancing? Are they going to, move back home and then not move back to New York afterwards? I guess I'm curious what your thoughts are. Like, what are the impacts that are going to happen on our industry because of this?
Yeah.
We can answer it in order if you'd like. John, you might have your opinion. Chris, you might have an opinion. Jane might have an opinion. Let's hear from everyone. It's a party.
I would
dance
offer
party.
Yes is the answer. And we operate in dance, dance especially, always in a state of precarity, right? Like, how many times we had colleagues who are like, you know what, I'm gonna throw this in because it's more important to me that I eat this month, and that's in non-pandemic times, right? That we're always operating on that risk. I think dance also, because of the toll on the body as a instrument, always has a short burn, a short lifespan. A lot of people don't make it into their 30s, certainly, into their 40s. You get rare and rare with that. Those things are chronic or endemic to our field to begin with. And now we're being stressed by this other piece. So I'm a realistic optimist. That's also why I locate myself on the 5. And I hope that people may say, you know what, I don't want to try and do this in a large metropolitan city anymore, but I do still want to make, and this is still important to me, and maybe I can do it somewhere else. And maybe that is in their hometown where they grew up. Maybe it's moving somewhere else. Maybe it's some people who say, you know what, I realized that I can make 2 or 3 dance films a year. I can be, and then I can carve out a whole other life for the other 9 months out of the year. Like, it may look different. It's always looked different than people who have a full-time 9-to-5 job. And there's an opportunity that it could evolve even further. But there's also going to be, for lack of a better term, some casualties that are not going to continue through, whether it's choreographers or dancers who are like, it's just too hard to try and bounce back. And that I don't know how we can save anyone other than continuing to take care of each other. And I think part of the challenge in this is that there is no definitive end, so it's hard to be decisive right now.
Yeah,
but this is the way forward.
Yeah. John?
Sure. Well, I will say, Kristie's so articulate, and the thing you're saying at the end about the uncertainty of this ending, just makes it hard to know how to proceed exactly. And I will say, one of the things that seems to be a little bit, at least, of a theme here is that it is important to try to be as present as possible with what is happening, because that is the literally is not even in a new age kind of way of let's try to stay present, but it literally is the only reality we can hold on to right now with any sort of solidity. I will say, like, for my dance company, like our rehearsal director has basically moved up to Vermont with her family, which is just a much better place for her to be than in Brooklyn. And I mean, I look at her on Zoom and I'm like, your life looks pretty good up there. Like, maybe that's going to be a lasting change. One of our dancers is an international person. Um, and now with everything that's happening with green cards and immigration, or which might be happening, I wonder, well, how is this going to affect her? And one of our dancers is getting close to 40. I don't know. Like, maybe Dance Hibotham will look very different when in the future. It's all.
Yeah, well said, Jane.
Yeah, I kind of have two thoughts. The day that like freaked me out, I think, was when I realized that in specifically in classical ballet, when we think about classical ballet in the canon right now, we think of like Swan Lake, Sleeping Beauty, Cinderella, and there's this been maybe the last 8-10 years like a real push towards getting out of those titles and trying to make some new stories and engage with audiences in a new way. And I would argue there's been traction. And I had the realization that new ballets that are in the works with costume shops closed and scenic shops closed and dancers not able to rehearse and choreographers who can't travel internationally, they will not be making new ballets next year. And with the concern over selling tickets, we might have to return to a world where all we see for the next couple of years is Swan Lake and Cinderella again. And that is a scary future to me because I feel like it's a 5 steps forward, 10 steps back kind of a thing. But hopeful that audiences will want to dig into something fresh and different when we're able to come out of it. But on a more hopeful thing, my brother, who was a classical actor for a few years, told me recently that right after World War II was when Fringe theater was birthed because people didn't have the money to go to big theaters and do the high society things. So people started making art in their garages and in their backyards, and it was a new form that totally was innovated. So I have hope that dance and theater will find a creative new way out of wherever we are now. I look forward to seeing what it is.
For sure. I think that's a really great point. There's something that I've noticed recently that's been growing. One of the platforms that we are streaming on currently is called Twitch. And for those who don't know what Twitch is, it's primarily a video game streaming service. It's owned by Amazon, and it's put out there so you can watch people play video games. And while that sounds so ridiculous to so many people, there's a lot of people that have a ton of followers and viewership. But as I've been going
thousands
back,
and thousands,
more and more people are doing their own private dance. They're just things that make them happy. There's a person that I actually, as a gamer, I use Twitch as my own streaming service. And when I stream games, there's somebody that I play with, and some of the nights she does her own private rave where she turns off the lights and has glow sticks and she just dances, and it's her idea of fun. I mean, she's got her kids, she's got her husband, but like when everyone's in bed, she's like, now I can kind of let off some steam. I can go and do some rave dance. But there have been more and more, as I've noticed, like you can go through recommended channels and it's like, hey, this person is dancing. This is dance. There's a ton of already built in dance features like for categories. So when people are searching stuff that they want to watch, they can watch people just dance, and you can interact, you can talk to people. And like right now, there's a couple streamers that are on that that I usually follow, and one person is just doing ASMR. She's got a setup with 2 microphones, and she has currently 3,000 viewers, which means 3,000 people are watching her at this one moment, right? So anybody who's dancing can generate that same viewership if they become more popular, and people who watch give money, like ridiculous amounts of money that they just kind of give away for fun, to allow them to keep making content.
Like, wow, you're really good at what you do. Here's cash.
I'm not pretty enough to make this kind of content. No. This is like real dollar bills. So like
it's monopoly money.
They give them some paper. It's not real.
It looks
it's
nice.
Printed on some sort of cracker. They don't even get it. It's like, but yeah, it's so as we see all of this moving forward, I think the fact that we are so technologically connected right now, there are new ways to do that fringe theater where you can set up something in your garage and you can actually just broadcast. You can just stream you being yourself. And if that involves dance, if that involves anything, like it's at least getting the I'm gonna take this back. I feel like a lot of people do this because it's something they love, right? It's not that they're doing it specifically for the money. So if you can still find a way to do something you love and put it out there for the world, people will then see that, and people will then in turn allow you to generate from that. And so I think it's just a big
so I don't want to launch into a whole new conversation because I know that we're getting towards the end of this. But I'm just going to say, like, that's one of the things that I'm most conflicted about, because people are always saying, like, well, art will continue, artists will continue to create regardless of whether they will be paid. And it's like, should they? Like, they just keep putting out that content for free.
I mean, did you get into the arts for money? Or did you get into the arts because you love it and then you made a business out of it?
Right. But is it a public good? Like right now, what we are doing at George Mason, our digital platform, is 100% free. So it's a public good. Moving into the fall, that's obviously not a sustainable model. So will people pay for what they will enjoy? Like if someone sees a live stream, they'll maybe tune in for however long that they would like to. If they have to pay for it, will they actually do it?
Well, okay, so here's the long and short of it. Things are changed now, and it's, I guess, up to us to dictate what that looks like moving forward. Like things have already changed. Things are already different now than they were 2 weeks ago, than they were a month and a half ago.
Than they were yesterday, honestly.
Exactly.
Like, yeah.
And noting that these things are the changes, we are the pioneers on this forefront. Like we are the ones that will propel this moving forward. So if this means finding out a way to generate revenue in an artistic field and displaying it in a way that you can still get traction, then that's up to us to figure out how to do that. You might have dancers who use Twitch as a service. They might not make any money at all. But that's going back to what I was saying. Like this is for us. This has never happened before in history. Like the difference between this and World War II is in World War II, it was encouraged that people go out to spend money. It's like, hey, we need to keep reinvigorating the economy.
You
gotta go out. Yeah, like you have to leave your house, go out, go buy this, go buy bonds, stuff like that. Right now, we're encouraged to stay away from each other. We're encouraged to close things down. How do we overcome that obstacle? By supplying something that is some might deem it non-essential, but I think that's because a lot of people don't understand how essential it is. Like, I don't think people understand how much the arts in all aspects affects society. I was talking to somebody the other day. We got out of one of the toughest time periods in history, like leaving the bubonic plague, leaving the Dark Ages, and entering the Renaissance, right? The Renaissance was the introduction of arts, like making people happy, living for yourself after leaving such a dark period of time. I don't think people really appreciate the levity behind that, like just how serious that is.
Well, and that's my point, is because like we entered this time and then the arts immediately became free. Like people immediately started to stream, and everyone was offering everything for free. And so it'll be really interesting to see what happens in the fall when people cannot continue that model. And like, people maybe for a ballet I mean, Jane, what are the prices for a ballet performance?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking, like the average ticket price for a ballet show is like $89.
Right.
That's that middle.
But people are going to pay like max $15 to see something online. Like,
I mean, it is interesting because I do think that even, in a different time, we even talk about that in terms of free programming at the Kennedy Center versus paid programming at the Kennedy Center. We have on the Millennium Stage a free show every single day of the year. And people always make the argument, if you have a free show every day, why would people pay $89 to then go see the ballet after that?
Yes,
and I do think, it is. I agree with you, Adrian, that I'm curious to see when the good-hearted generosity has to end and we have to figure out how to insert a paywall or how that process happens or what that happens. What is the differentiation between this is the free content versus this is the content that people are paying for? And maybe the paid content isn't watch the 3-hour ballet on the screen. Maybe the paid content is a conversation with the choreographer and a dissection of the rehearsal video. And that's what people would pay $50 for.
I mean, what about something like, this is going to sound really weird, but like legitimately, what about like subscription services? If you have a program that does online entertainment of a variety that reaches out to multiple crowds, Netflix charges, you got Hulu that charges for monthly subscriptions, Arts can charge.
Called Marquee TV.
She already knows it. That's what's up.
Yep, marquee.tv.
It's a thing.
And
they're free right now.
And they're free right now. For what, 3 months. The other thing that's challenging, what this reveals, right? It's not just about monetization, but it is, and how all of, I think, the coronavirus and different sectors reveals the interconnectivity of everything. So Marquee TV mostly has shows that have been filmed abroad because they don't have the same union and labor issues in venues. So it's not all international content. It could be American companies like the Mark Morris Dance Group performing L'Allegro out of Spain, or company Hervé Cuvi, which actually is an international that comes over here a lot. But so that is available, and they've been around for a couple of years. I don't have the data or knowledge about like what kind of traction that they had before this moment, but I'll be curious, like, are they able to keep it? And then it comes back to our question of, I think we do have to change a format, and maybe it's not the 3-hour experience, maybe it's different content. Maybe it is a form of dance films, how they'll change it up a little bit. It's asking those different questions when we're making the work, as well as figuring out how do we build a different system of support around the work, because we can't return to how things used to be before. And so I think the question, and you had asked, I think, Adam, about like, would John start sleeping more? When he came through this on the other side. And that's what I asked myself personally and professionally, is like, hey, what am I doing now that I want to keep? And what was I doing before that I want to let go? And I think the whole field needs to ask itself those questions too.
So a quick follow up to that, and we do need to wrap up because we are now way out of time. But I just want to ask each of our three guests really quick. Sort of a yes or no plus answer. Have the performing arts in general, dance in particular maybe, have they changed forever? Or are we going to go back to normal? John?
I mean, I guess the truth of the matter is I really don't know. I just don't know how to answer that.
That's fair. That's fair.
Information. What I will say is that, and we keep talking also about the arts being resilient, the one thing I do trust is that whether or not they return to some form of what they were, this is not the death of dance. Dance will always, it finds its way into crevices and then peaks out and grows into something new. So I do legitimately take hope from that I'm not worried that the form will no longer exist. Or, it'll just potentially be different than what we used to know.
Fair enough. Kristie?
I think they're changed forever. And how it's too soon to tell. I was remarking to someone else, like it took 70 to 100 years to develop the nonprofit performing arts sector to where we are now. And can we acknowledge it was not perfect? And so for us to say like, well, what will it look like next? There will be many iterations. And that'll also happen in waves.
Yeah, I just want to say real quick, this is a show that respects science, and I don't know is an acceptable answer to any question. It is okay if we are not sure. Nobody knows, but I'm curious about
It
everyone's
sounds like
opinions.
you've been to a dance show before.
Oh, one or two. I'd say one or two.
Yeah.
With more than a couple of people on this call. Jane, your thoughts?
Yeah, I feel like I'm more with John on this one. I think I was watching one of the live streams from New York City Ballet yesterday, and the sound of 2,000 people applauding at the end of the ballet, I literally started crying because I realized I'd been watching all this art but hadn't been like surrounded with audience, and I didn't realize that was inside my head. So I think in some way people will go back to the live theater en masse to experience performing arts en masse. I think I'm hopeful that more of what will change is the cooperation, I hope, between bookers and presenters and artists and agents and unions and orchestras and stagehands, and that everybody will be able to speak more openly and talk more candidly about the field that we're in and how our business works, and that maybe it will strengthen everyone.
Maybe people in general will just become better.
Seems lofty when you say it like that.
Kristie, I'm right there with you. Yes.
I mean, like I have sensed a generosity in the field. It's like there's something to be said about you were literally. I was telling this to Chris. You're not necessarily in the same boat, but we're all in the same storm on our own different boats, having our own different experiences, but we're all in it and we're all experiencing it. And so like there's something to be said about that.
And the fact that it's literally affecting the entire globe. This is the only thing ever.
Yeah. Well, if and when things do start to change to move forward, I'm sure that this group we have right here, right now, will be one of the forefront groups creating that change. So I have no doubt in my mind that you will come up with something amazing moving forward, and I will be there to view it.
Me too, and Adam,
as long
well
as
said.
It has gaming in it.
Well said. Adam, I completely agree with you, and I think it's fair enough to leave it there. John, Kristie, and Jane, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. This is amazing.
Thank you.
I miss you guys.
We miss you so much. Everybody here, we just miss you so much. I can't wait to see you all in person soon. Nice. Oh my god, let's party.
Great background.
John, look at that! You got the Whoopi and Star Trek at the same time. Amazing, well played, sir. Just right at the end. Love it. Perfect, well done. A special super thanks to my wonderful, beautiful, and amazing wife, Adrian. Thank you so much for being our co-host today. Crushing it as always. Adam, you're amazing in so many ways. Thank you, sir. This is Corona with Lime. We're on every Monday and Thursday, 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific. And we'll be back next week with more craziness and wildness. But as we are wont to do, before we sign off completely, we'd like to have a little video ending, and I think that we found a really great one. Adrian, do you want to say anything about it before we play it?
I mean, I will just say that this has kind of emerged as one of the greatest responses so far to having to do everything on Zoom. And I think it's pretty good, innovative, creative outlet. So, yeah.
I completely agree. I think, and Adrian showed me this the other day, and I was like, oh, we absolutely have to end the show with this. how it is possible to do amazing dance performances from home on Zoom, the platform we are on right now.
I did confirm it was one take. Let's just.
And this was all done in one take, and this is one of the best dance videos I've seen during this whole situation.
Besides any Dance Higginbotham video ever.
Well, and as soon as Dance Higginbotham does a video during quarantine, that will win. But until that happens, John, get to work on that, please. You have homework. But until then, I just want to say goodnight, everybody. Thank you so much for watching once again. And here we go. This is it Thao? How do you pronounce it?
Yeah.
Thao and the Get Down, Stay Down by Phenom.
Thank you all. Good night.
Thanks all. Good night, everybody.
They're still here.
Sip on joy, the purest drink. Move to make, thought to think. They can feel us from afar. Avenues and boulevard. White collar cannibal, what you gonna do? Everyone's attending, so who you gonna choose? I will not equivocate. If that's all, let's celebrate. Shamefully, shame's claim on me. Led my life with infamy. But I don't call it, I don't solve it. I dissolve it famously. I've been so politely at the bottom. Pull it tight, bootstrap, strap it on and top 'em. I've been so politely at the bottom. Pull it tight, bootstrap, strap it on and top 'em. Past, I was patient. Now I'm so tired. Feverish few, I will not drop it. Power cowards never stop it. I have nurtured you, corrupted. I am erupting, don't interrupt it. Careful, I'm an animal, trap. First of the secondary class. You know I don't trust you, that's the catch. Don't you fucking touch me, I will nash. Cause I am an old phenomenon, and I am